We are in the house, Beyond Jiu Jitsu Podcast. My name is Adam Childs with my boy, Kieren Lefebvre. Episode number 45.
45.
Good save, Kieren.
Good five.
What's up, bro?
Man, having a good morning. I had to go get coffee.
Yeah,
I got
was it
coffee
last
beans this
episode or
morning.
the one before?
It was the last episode.
I had no freaking coffee.
Oh, wait, no.
And-
So 2 episodes ago, we had no coffee. And then last episode, we said we had coffee, but really, I just scraped together the last of the beans in the machine.
It felt like if you were one of those people who like finds old cigarette butts and gets the little remainder of the tobacco.
Who would do that?
I don't know, bro. I grew up in Byron Bay. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
And scrape
never
it
heard
together.
of that. Never done that before.
Dude, I was almost looking at like the, what do you call the, I don't know what you call it. The bit where you put the used,
Ashtray.
no, I'm not talking about cigarettes anymore.
Oh.
The bit where you put like when you take the basket, the coffee basket out of the espresso machine,
Yeah.
and like dump the
Yeah.
the little.
It does have a name, actually.
It
I
has
can't- it has a proper name. I can't remember it.
Anyway, the bit where you use the used coffee grounds or
Yeah,
whatever.
The
I don't-
spent grounds.
Yeah,
go in there.
I was almost like, I wonder if we could run another,
Oh, yeah,
shot
another-
through them. I was like, I need coffee, and I had so little faith in you that I
Yeah.
brought us coffee, but then you did get coffee.
I got it this
So
morning.
hang on, take some credit away from Kieren. When he says we've got coffee, it's because we're drinking the coffees that I brought.
Well, yeah, but I got coffee beans.
Yeah,
So we'll have
we'll
one
chew
after.
on those.
Yeah, yummy.
All right, so today, episode of 40, what was it?
5, 45.
Good save, Kieren. We're talking about things I wish I knew as a white belt, but more specifically, kind of, I guess it's a bit more personal.
Yeah.
And you can take, opposed to it just being like, here are the top 5 things every white belt should know. It's more
Yeah. Who would make a video like that?
Yeah, some chump. it's more my personal advice as like me, myself, where I am now
Yeah.
as a black belt, talking to little bitty Adam white belt. So it's more like personal things I wish I did differently, or things I
Yeah.
wish I knew, or regrets,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Shower more. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Change your face. you
Yeah.
know? But before we go into that, you had something you were like, I'll save it for the air. What was it?
I totally
You
forgot.
forgot.
I got distracted with the coffee thing. It was something to do with coffee. I don't know. What was yours?
Well, yeah, I said as well something that I had to share. So it was.
Oh, I remember mine now.
Do you want to go first?
No, you
No,
go.
you hang up. Yeah.
I just had if you watch the video version of this podcast, which some people do.
Do you
shout
mean
out-
as in the one on YouTube?
Yeah, the one on YouTube.
But
if
it's
you
not a
didn't know.
video, right? Don't you just put the audio, or are you putting the videos now? I thought,
Why do we have the camera?
well, we have the camera. I thought it was just you wanted memories. I don't know.
You're such a weirdo. No, so shout out to everyone on YouTube watching the video
Hello.
version. Now we're waving of this podcast. You can watch that over on YouTube. Just type in Beyond Jiu Jitsu Podcast, and you shall find it. But if you are a keen observer, you would notice that often Adam and I are holding pens, but we never write anything down.
I just looked over and I was like, you just wrote pen.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the pens. Oh, I should have brought it up in a better context, but it's like I think I can't remember who it was. I think it was Russell Brand. He was getting roasted, or maybe it was no, I think it was Chael Sonnen actually. It was Chael Sonnen like years ago. He was doing an interview with some guy and he was getting roasted or something, and they're going back and forth. And one of Chael's like comebacks was, why are you always holding a pen but you never write anything down?
Right.
And then I thought about that with our show. We are always holding pens. You and I generally, you're not holding yours, which makes this
and
joke worse.
last episode I dropped my pen and
Yeah.
I was like, I
Yeah,
actually
we're always
thought
dropping
you
shit.
stole it. I was like, hey,
fuck?
Kieren took my pen.
We're
and
always
then it was
holding-
under the table.
Yeah, we're holding pens. We always have paper, but we never write anything down.
Yeah. Well, it started, sometimes we do have specific notes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my use of paper fluctuates to whether I remember to bring my laptop or not.
Yeah, that's fair.
And you don't often write stuff during the episode, but you usually have a whole page stacked full of notes and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Just to
you're
keep us on track.
definitely
keep
reading
things
off
flowing.
it.
Yeah.
But I guess one of the things that I think we mentioned this in some previous episodes. I used to have a tally of the amount of times I said and like.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I've just given up on counting the amount of times I say and like, or if I've actually improved my podcast.
You've definitely improved
and stopped saying and like as frequently. I definitely still say it.
I noticed that I was doing in the beginning, I was trying to have like a normal conversation. Like when you were talking, just to be engaged with what you're saying, I'll be like, yeah, yep. And then when I'm listening and editing the audio, I'm like, that's really annoying. Like during a podcast, you don't want to hear the other person like within reason every like 2 seconds be like, yeah. So you're like, shut up, let him talk.
Yeah, it is interesting because, you know, we came into this. It's not as if you and I have like presenting or radio backgrounds or something like that. And, you know, or interviewing backgrounds. And obviously it's almost like one of those industries that a good interviewer or a good presenter or a good host, whether it's radio, television, whatever it is, when they do the job really well, you kind of don't notice anything.
Exactly.
But when someone is really bad at interviewing someone or a really bad presenter, you notice. It makes me think of another thing. It makes me think of like costumes in films as well. You know, when a costume stands out, it's because it's been made poorly.
Yeah.
But when you don't really notice the clothes that the actor is wearing, like you're kind of not supposed to, unless it's some, you know, period film or something like that.
Exactly.
So I think
that's a great
I think we're getting better.
Yeah.
I know. I should start using analogies more.
Yeah, man.
So the thing I was going to tell you 1 or 2 episodes ago, I think it was only last episode, we, you know, mentioned that I was having surgery shortly. For those who didn't catch that episode, I have bone spurs in my left elbow, which is essentially extra bone that you don't want to be there. So the surgeon goes in and grinds it back to allow mobility back into the joint.
Caused essentially by jiu-jitsu, years of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, years of jiu-jitsu. Boxers get the injury as well from constant compression and hyperextension of the elbow joint. So, yeah, I actually don't know if I don't think it's the same thing as tennis elbow. I think that's a tendonitis thing.
Yeah, it is. It's tendon, outside elbow.
Right. Anyway, so I have that surgery tomorrow, right? We record in advance. So when you're listening to this, I'll be already on the mend.
Yeah, this releases like in December. It's like a week before Christmas.
Yeah. So I'll already be back at it. Anyway, so I'm having this surgery. The new news I found out only this morning. So I'm having that surgery tomorrow, which is November 18th when I'm having the surgery. I then get to have another surgery on November 29th. So that's fun.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
So probably my students know this, but a while back I had a surgery, like I had a deviated septum surgery.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that is, that's a surgery to straighten out your sinus, to clear your airways in your nose. It's quite a common surgery. However, it did not go to plan, and there's been a persistent issue right at the back of my sinus that we've tried to treat with medication over the last, I can't remember when I had that surgery.
Months ago. It was before lockdown. So
so I had it
6 months ago.
I don't know,
maybe?
man. It was in the first half of 2021. I had the surgery. Anyway,
5 months ago.
It didn't go to plan, so I need to go back in for another surgery on November 29th where they have to solve the problem that has not been able to be resolved with medication.
Damn.
So that kind of sucks. However, you know, I'm not that bummed about it because it's not like I'm having my elbow surgery, recovering from that and being like, yeah, I can roll, and then needing this sinus surgery.
You're doing it back to back.
Yeah, I'm essentially doing them, you know, just under 2 weeks apart. By the time that I'm able to roll again and recovered from the elbow, I should be recovered from the sinus surgery. It's not as extreme as a deviated septum because they're not structurally rebuilding your sinus. In this surgery, he's just going right in the back and essentially removing something.
Yeah, right.
Part
of your brain.
Yeah, bit of my brain. Yeah. That was he was looking at the CT scan. It was just this morning. And I was like, what's that bit there? And he's like, oh, you don't want to take that out. And I was like, all right, you can leave that. He was like, yeah, that's your brain on the other side of that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So, I mean, it sucks a little bit, but I didn't know if there was, you can't have 2 general anesthetics within X amount of time. Like
I was thinking that
I
when you
wasn't
said that.
sure
Yeah.
if it was then by default, you're having elbow surgery,
Let's just do
tomorrow.
it at the same time.
So I thought it was going to be like, you got to wait 2 months, until you can have that was going to suck.
Yeah.
But the fact that I'm getting it done 10 days later means
okay.
I'm pretty much going to recover from both at the same time.
Okay.
I think actually the sinus one is quite quick. He said, I think 2 weeks post-surgery, you can already exercise and do a bit of grappling.
Sweet.
But I'm not even going to be ready to do that yet because of my elbows.
Well, I remember when you got your previous surgery, you were good to go, but it was still very sensitive. You know what I mean?
You couldn't have
your
my
son
nose touched.
punched you in the face, or smacked you in the head or something.
There was
like
a
that.
bit where Atlas
kicked you or something.
Yeah, we were in the playground and my son's 2.5, and I leant over to grab something off the ground or whatever it was, and he just ran past, and because of obviously he's short, his forehead just went straight into my nose as he ran past as I was bent over picking something up.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, and he headbutted me and stuff. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, it sucks, but that's cool. I mean, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So, what knowing everything that you know, what would you tell
White belt
Adam?
Prepare for surgeries.
That's a good one.
So yeah, like I said at the start.
Wait. I need to clarify something. Sorry. Is this day 1 white belt Adam, or is this senior white belt about to get you blue belt Adam? 2 different people.
God, man, I can't even. I don't even remember if at the time I got stripes at white belt. Did I? I don't know, bro. Yeah, I think I did.
Let's just go middle of the road.
Middle, 2-stripe white belt Adam. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'm actually curious. Do you already? I mean, as someone who's towards the end of being a white belt, right? Yeah, you got a green white belt coming your way. You saw the reel. Is there already things that don't think things I wish I knew, because of course you could do a week of jiu-jitsu and be like, I wish I knew this on day 1.
Oh yeah.
But is there things that, hypothetically time travel that you would tell, one stripe Kieren? Is there already things in your in the bigger picture, your short period of time training that you would wish you could tell younger Kieren? Not younger Kieren.
Start a podcast. Yeah. Look, man, I don't know. Hey, I don't know if there's some things I would tell. I mean, outside of the obvious, hey, study fucking this Kimura grip, or study this position, because I'm going to learn it anyway. I'd probably, honestly, I'm not sure. Probably the biggest thing would be to train lunches and 6:30 class.
Yeah, which is a new revolution for you.
But I mean, logistically, I couldn't, because I was, 9 to 5.
Work for the Navy.
Yeah, that's way better. Yeah, I was working in the Navy, so I couldn't really train when I would like, which was a big part of why I left, really, amongst other reasons. So that would be a revelation, but something that I couldn't really enact. So thinking back to when I was in the Navy, I think, I don't know, maybe just say it's going to get better. Not like, oh, your life's going to get better, just hang in there, silver lining. More like, hey, it's going to get better. Your jiu-jitsu is going to get better. And I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Not that I was having a hard time. You're going to get better. And don't worry when people say you're strong.
Yeah. Oh, bro, you're so strong.
Someone said to me, I know they don't listen to the podcast, so someone said to me yesterday, it was in conversation. I don't think they were trying to be insulting, but it was really insulting. They were like, yeah, but with your jiu-jitsu, you can just brute force your way into things, so it doesn't matter for you, sort of thing. And
I already know who that was without
I'm
you telling me.
Yeah, fair enough, man, but come on. I'm pretty technical.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, when people say stuff like, oh, so you just muscle it. And it's like I get where the person's coming from, but sometimes a technique does require a huge amount of muscle. And the example I always give is I say, oh yeah, because do you think that, that boxer lands that knockout blow softly and gently, and he doesn't? No, man, there's a huge amount of muscle and force behind it with technique,
Yeah.
I hate that
Anyway.
argument. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, if I look back to younger me, the one advice that I wouldn't need to give is the whole moving to Brazil, because I obviously did that,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't have been able to move earlier. If I could give myself, it's not so much advice, it's something that I lacked, which was, I guess the advice would be to tell younger self to invest the time into the mental side of competition, because I've always been quite successful in jiu-jitsu competitively. I mean, people know not as successful as I would have liked to have been. And, I didn't win world titles or anything like that. But the competitions that I've done, I've always done relatively well. However, in my competition arsenal, the weakest link has always been the mental side of competition, which is a huge part of any competitive environment. There's not only just like the mental games, but the mental toughness and things like that. And I think one of the biggest things I wish I did as someone who was trying to pursue the competitive career and that path of jiu-jitsu is I wish I learned more about the mental side of competing and how to have a competitive mindset and how to be mentally strong in competition. And, essentially I wish I could tell younger Adam, hey man, maybe you want to invest into, not life coaching, but, there's successful athletes who have, for example, like there's people like Michael Jordan who would ring Tony Robbins like before a big game. Like there's very successful athletes who still have, not a therapist or psychologist, I don't know, like a sports coach or a mental coach, whatever the correct term is. I don't know what it is. If you know,
I think it's sports psychologist.
Thank you. Yeah. Sports psychologist. Like, I wish I could tell younger self, like, maybe not necessarily white belt, but like blue belt Adam, when I had a room full of like the best team in the world telling me, dude, you're the best blue belt in the world. Like you should, I kind of never had the strongest competition mindset or self-belief, maybe you could say. So I wish I could have invested more in that, and whether that meant speaking to a sports psychologist or, because I mean, I remember towards the end of my time in Brazil, like even Michael Lange, who was already a 3-time black belt world champion, had a sports psychologist, that he worked with before competitions and stuff like that. So this is someone who's already established as one of the best in the world, whereas I was just like a little blue belt. That's definitely one of the things that I wish I invested more in. It's things that now I've learned as I've spent more time in jiu-jitsu, as I've competed more, as I've coached people through competitions, as I've seen people come and go, people succeed, people fail. Like all these experiences has now brought me to what I feel is a really good place to stand from a coaching point of view and really help other people not have those same issues that I had. I'm not saying I'm a sports psychologist, but I think I've passed through a lot of experiences as someone who didn't naturally have a strong competition mind. I've had to learn how to have that. And I wish I learned it as a white or blue belt, but some people naturally have it. So I think maybe it then may be a little harder to pass on how to guide someone through some of the mental issues.
If you can do it naturally, quote unquote,
right.
Naturally becomes
exactly.
natural
Like
to you.
If it's never been an issue for
Yeah.
you never had to overcome that, it's harder to relate to someone who's struggling with that.
Yeah. It's the same with like personal trainers that, if they've lost a substantial amount of weight and then put on like a lot of muscle and change their life around, a lot of the time, depending on the individual, they can be the best motivational coaches for others, because they've been in that situation.
Yeah, because they've had to go through it themselves.
Exactly. So I think one thing about this that you've passed on to me that's really helped recently, and I think you said it on air, and it was along the lines of when you were preparing with JT and you did those hectic sessions in the park, getting ready for that big competition in Brazil,
which was the selectives for me to win a ticket to the US. Yeah,
right. And you were preparing for that, and because of the preparation you went through for that, you said in your mind, like, there's no way that whoever I'm rolling with, like whoever I'm competing with, there's no way that they're less tired than I am. There's no way I'm more tired than they are.
Yeah.
Because I know the preparation I've been through. There's no way. It's not possible. And I've been doing that just in the gym, like implementing that mantra, if you will, when I'm gassed out and I have that little voice that wants to just, oh, don't worry about it. Don't try and pass so hard. There's only like 3 minutes left. Just coast or whatever. Or like I'm digging into the hurt locker during a roll. I've just been telling myself, like, there's no fucking way this person is less tired than I am right now.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way.
Yeah, that was definitely the fittest I've ever been. And yeah, I remember
It's helped a lot.
I've never had a belief as strong as that at that moment where I was like, there is no way. Like, I was gasped, but I was like, there's just no way. It's not possible that I'm more tired than this guy. It's not possible. The amount of work
really
that I
helped me
did.
a lot. Even if it's not true, like, I'm convinced that it is, in that moment, because I don't know. That's one of my biggest assets is fitness. That's just the biggest asset that I bring.
Yeah.
So,
and I wish I did, another tool on the same sort of the same point as competition mindset and things like that is, learning how to do visualization is super, super strong. It's almost like gaslighting yourself.
do you visualize winning, or are you talking about visualizing as in, because one thing I've been doing a lot recently, and I don't know if it's just because I'm at the level now where I can do it, is I'll visualize techniques all day, like all the time.
I used to do that quite organically because when you're earlier in your jiu-jitsu journey, it's just so much new information all the time, right? It's just like, it's just hard to not have that information flowing through your brain because it's just there at the forefront of your brain the whole time. So it's not like, for me, it would just happen organically, whether I wanted to be thinking about jiu-jitsu or not.
Yeah.
It just did, right? Like it was just there. But visualization.
Are you able to problem solve by visualizing?
Yeah, but then it doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
There's times that I'll be like, maybe I could do this. Yeah, that could work. And then you get in the gym and you're like, man, can I try this on you? And you're like, oh yeah, that doesn't bend that way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work,
You don't have 3 legs. What's going on here?
But no, I more mean like visualizing for competition where, it just helps solidify this belief, in yourself and visualizing whatever it is, how the fight plays out, So I might like close my eyes and literally just over and over just visualize, I'm going to do this takedown, then pass, and then like, and there's my hand getting raised, or visualizing standing on top of the podium or whatever it is. That's a super, super strong tool, and again, I'm not a sports psychologist, but I believe it's something that sports psychologists swear by a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Which is visualization.
So in my particular job in the Navy, we had access to performance coaching because, for those that don't know, I was a maritime warfare officer who specialized in navigation, effectively. I was an intermediate navigator. So during MWO training or maritime warfare officer training, it's kind of like we're up there with pilots insofar as how much it costs to train us. So they put a lot of energy and a lot of money into us, and our training is actually longer than pilots, in the Navy pilots, that is. So they give us access to performance coaches that come in and do like a personality assessment and give you, all sorts of tools and tips and tricks. And visualization was one of their big ones,
right,
like to help people that, because we get assessed sort of, pretty critically throughout the training. And it culminates in a very lengthy assessment period that can be incredibly stressful. And I've seen people that are very competent just crumble under pressure. So, yeah, visualization is one of their biggest tools to utilize. Is that visualize the simulator run that you have to do, visualize the assessment, visualize what you're going to do, and all of that. So yeah,
super strong tool.
Yeah, for performance, 100%.
One of the other things that this is, I guess, so the previous things I mentioned, people could just take as advice anyway. one of the things that I wish this is very specific to me. I'm not suggesting everyone takes this on board, but I wish I wasn't. I wish I didn't care so much, and I wish I wasn't as nice to people as I was like during my training. And I don't mean that as in be a dickhead, but when you're in if you want to be the best in the world, I mean, there's no buts about it. You kind of have to be a little bit selfish. A little bit's an understatement. You have to be quite selfish. And I was surrounded by a group of people who were extremely selfish. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I know it's kind of like the word itself has negative connotations. Like I was training with a lovely bunch of people, but when competition training started, I'm talking about the competition team, not just, I'm rocking up to a beginner's class. When the competition class started, every individual on the mat, they cared more about their own training than their training partners. And it's not like people did things to intentionally hurt each other or things like that. But at the end of the day, like, I want my training partners to get better too, but everyone was way more invested in themselves. Of course, why, they're there so they can get better at jiu-jitsu. Yes, they also want their teammates to get better because that also helps them get better. But, it wasn't an environment where people would necessarily, I'm going to take 5 minutes out of my training session to help you with something, when, like, I'll give you an example. There were, let's say in the competition class, I remember there was a time when I was quite fresh back after a knee surgery. And this guy, Edson, who I trained with not all the time, but we were similar-ish weight, but he was a blue belt world champion. He was always like a belt above me. So if I was a purple belt, he was a brown belt, like, and super, super tough. I think in the whole time I was there, I passed his guard like once, Edson was super tough, very high level guy. And I remember I can't remember what belts we were, but I was still not 100% back from a surgery. And he was like, Adam, you want to roll? And I was like, oh man, but yeah, I kind of can't go hard. And so he was like, okay, don't worry about it. Like he didn't want to roll with me unless it was proper hard competition rolling because I'm being kind of detrimental. So he didn't care like, hey, I'll help Adam out and like give him a nice light roll because he's recovering from a surgery. He's like, no. Like I need hard competition rolls because like I want to get better and this is competition training. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean,
in that regard, it was a room full of selfish people, but I didn't feel I put myself like first all the time. I know I'm trying to explain this without just sounding like a complete wank, but I wish I was a little bit more prioritized my training and my goals a bit more than just kind of trying to keep everyone happy and not rock the boat or whatever. Because I mean, man, people didn't like me there anyway. So like, it probably took like 4 years before, I felt like I was really sort of welcomed into the group of competitors. Like, I think I've spoken about this before. It was just myself and this guy called Ali. We were the only two foreigners who lived there. And yeah, the internet still existed, but the world wasn't as integrated as it is today. And so we were kind of seen as these gringos, as these foreigners who were like stealing the jiu-jitsu from Alliance. Like it's this, closed doors just for the team sort of atmosphere. So we were kind of treated like outsiders, even though we lived there and trained there full time. It took years before Ali and I were kind of, treated as peers, I guess. So people didn't like me anyway. So I should have just like been like, well, fuck you guys. And, and trained really hard and whatnot. But that's very individual advice for me. That's like looking back at my time and just wishing that I cared a little less about other people and put more focus on my own progression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Particularly when you consider the environment you're in. It's not like you were just, at your local jiu-jitsu gym, wherever you so happen to live or worked or something. You went to Brazil to pursue a career. and you were there to train at a high level at the best gym in the world. So what you're saying makes perfect sense. It's not, we're not giving advice to white belts out there to, next time you go train with your training partners, just fucking try and smash them as hard as you can.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah, it's completely, that's missing the point. You were there for a very specific purpose with a specific goal, with a very specific team as well that was there for the same goal.
Yeah. And I mean, anyone who is disagreeing or not understanding what I'm saying right now, you suck. No,
Fuck you.
No, I would argue that you just haven't ever really experienced training in a competitive environment. And if you're still disagreeing with me, being like, yeah, man, I have. No, you haven't. Right? Like, it's kind of like that moron we spoke about the other day who says the best guys in the world only train twice a week. What a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
It's man, go train at a top competitive team. And once the timer ends, that might be all friends and whatnot, but during competition class, man, people don't want it. It's like they don't give an inch. Like, Eddie's competition class at a highly competitive, successful team / gym. And it's all, like I would get sometimes with particular training partners, the same nerves I would get before a competition, even though it's a training partner just in the gym, it would be like some roles were that intense and, some training partners not as much with, but there were certain training partners where I wouldn't say there was animosity between us, but we didn't necessarily like each other, like we weren't there to be friends. Like, I mean, we respected each other, but like didn't mean we had to be friends. It's the same as like, because for a lot of us, it was our job, right? The exact same way that when you go to work, man, you don't have to be friends with the person you work with, but if you're a decent human being, you're going to be, while they're your colleague, you're going to be polite to them.
Yeah, I didn't like any of my colleagues in the Navy.
Did you not actually? Like, did you
fucking suck it? Fuck them.
But yeah,
nah, they were right.
Everyone listening would have people that they work with or have worked with that they couldn't care less if they never saw again.
Yeah.
But while you're at work with them and working with them,
sure, you get along fine.
Yeah, you have to. You have to interact with them and be polite with them, or you should do at least, right? So, if you're not grasping what I'm saying, you just have not really trained in a full competitive environment, and it's like the same in business. You look at super successful businessmen, they don't make it to the top without stepping on some people to get
100%.
there,
it's like being disagreeable is a personality trait that's associated with success in certain fields. So like being, disagreeable nature.
Yeah. So I wish for me individually, I was a bit better at that. And I think that like for my personal advice, they're just essentially being a bit more selfish to improve my progression in jiu-jitsu, as well as like working on my competitive mindset. I feel like competition results as a whole are kind of the only things in jiu-jitsu I didn't achieve that I wish I had. Like I'm still to today, I think, I'm still currently the only Australian to receive a black belt from Fabio Gurgel. I'm the only non-South American to have ever taught, maybe not now, sorry, but at the time, I was the only non-South American to teach jiu-jitsu at the Alliance headquarters in São Paulo. I own my own gym with my wife. I now live making a career with jiu-jitsu. So I have more goals that I want to achieve, but I've achieved the only thing that kind of, besides my future goals, the only past goals I didn't achieve was as much competition success as I would have liked to. And, I think those two things are, for me personally, the biggest bits of advice that I wish I could tell white belt
to address that goal.
To address that goal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Something I wish I did as well, I wish I had my first knee surgery bloody straight away. I wish I did that. When I blew out my first knee, I spent probably 9 months trying to avoid surgery, just doing rehab for it eventually to just completely fall apart and then have to have the surgery. Wish I just did that surgery day one, bro.
Yeah, that's another point that, like, as you were talking, I've been reflecting on on things, advice that I would give myself. I was about to say my white belt self myself. So we can talk about it now.
Yeah.
So, it's weird for me in this position. It's like, what would you tell your white belt self? Well, I am a white belt self. So what would I tell myself now, sort of thing? Or like, what do I wish that I focused on previously? But I think some of the points that I started to, come up with are holes in my game at the moment. But if I was to focus exclusively on those, or like tell myself back then to, hey, focus on this, would I have neglected all the other stuff that I'm comfortable with? Like, for example, I had sweeps, focus on sweeps, because I'm not super confident with sweeps from close guard, or like even like, yeah, I can get some. I got a couple that I can, I'm pretty confident with that. One in particular I hit on Ollie the other day. Haha.
Yeah, suck it, Ollie.
Suck it. So, some sweeps.
Ollie's a purple belt of ours that I watched you the other day. I don't know if I caught the sweep, but I watched you pass him, mount him, throw on a mounted triangle, which ended up then you being on the bottom like a regular triangle, but like tapped him. I was like,
love you, Ollie. But it was funny. And the reason he was so mad is because we started with him passing my guard and mounting me.
That's right. And you got out.
He mounted me. I swept from bottom side mount, passed him, submitted him, mounted him. So the position was reversed, which is bittersweet for me and for Ollie.
Just bitter for Ollie, right?
Bitter, without the sweet. What I'm trying to say is, if I tell myself back then, hey, focus on this, would I have neglected all the other stuff that I feel really confident with, like passing, for example? So sweeps is something that I'm still trying to work on. I think I'm probably better than I think I am, but I'm just not confident, if that makes sense. I'm not like, I don't believe in myself in those positions. I want to work on that. And another point is focus on concepts. Now, what I mean by that is you've said a lot of time, like there's been a lot of light bulb moments when you're trying to teach me a new thing. For example, with pressure passing, I remember once when we were doing like training, I think it was just you, me, and Andreas Brown Belt, ages ago, and you were talking about operating between the knee and the hip. And so that sort of concept, now that I understand that concept, maybe I'm in a position where I don't know the specific technique, but if I focus on operating and controlling that portion of my opponent's legs, then I will pass.
Yeah. So this is what I want to avoid is I don't want to say anything, anything that is just has no weight behind it. What I mean by that is I'm not going to sit here and go, advice to white belt Adam, buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Or
that's excellent advice back then.
Yeah. Or something like, oh man, focus on leg locks.
Yeah.
But maybe in the future, this will sound like it's advice like that, but we'll do an episode a bit more in depth on it in the future. But yeah, this focusing on concepts, it's a big shift in how jiu-jitsu is being learnt now. And I strongly believe that, the concept thing gets thrown around a lot, the word. So let me explain what I mean and why I believe that focusing on concepts is super important. At the moment, you're seeing guys who are, like 17 years old, 18, 19 years old, who are, going toe-to-toe or sometimes beating very well-established current world champion black belts, right? And it's not like, but because he's younger. I'm not saying like the 18-year-old's beating a 50-year-old. It's like they're beating maybe like a guy in his late 20s or his early 30s where they're still, in their physical prime, right? And you look at that and you think, well, that kind of doesn't add up. Like the younger guy hasn't been on the planet long enough to have learnt as much jiu-jitsu as this guy, regardless of how many sessions he's putting in. The other guy's been training 3 times a day, every day for 20 years. This guy's been doing it for 10 years. Like how? And I've already seen this shift in the way that I learnt jiu-jitsu, the way jiu-jitsu is now being taught, the way that I have changed the way that I start to teach, which is focusing much more on concepts, because if you can fully understand a concept of a particular position, that gives you an incredibly solid foundation for then your techniques to be built on top of. So previously things were it's like there were certain techniques that were taught as your fundamental foundational techniques that everything else needed to be built on top of. Whereas now I believe it's better to fully teach and understand a concept of a position or a technique, right? And then on top of that, your technique can be taught. When you have that understanding, you don't have to learn as many techniques. So opposed to previously, it was like, let's say, some trivial number like, like Lucas Lepre has these, 120 different passing sequences and details to pass or whatever, some random number like that. So a younger person isn't alive long enough to learn all that shit. There's not enough time in the day. Whereas they just have this fundamental, ingrown understanding of this concept that on top of that, they only need like a handful of actual techniques because it's the concept that allows them to successfully apply said technique. And it can, of course, get incredibly complicated, but this methodical, like step 1, step 2, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't need to be that complicated. It can get that complicated. Like anything, the higher the level, the more complicated it's going to get. But I'll give you an example so it helps kind of make it a bit clearer. If we're let's say the example that you mentioned of operating in between the hip and knee, like in the thigh area, that's specifically when we were talking about this sort of chest forward pressure passing, keeping your feet really far away style of passing, right? Now we could go down one route and go, okay, every time my opponent makes this, minute movement, I'm going to do this, then I'll do this, then he does this, and like the back and forth, which still has its place, right? But rather than that, I want to teach this concept of taking ownership and control of that position. And if I can teach you to operate in between his thigh and knee, right? It's kind of like if you and I were playing a game of whatever field sport, doesn't matter, soccer, rugby, basketball, hockey, whatever it is, right? And if I can keep the ball in your half of the court or the field for the majority of the game, by default, more like you're on the defensive, I'm on the offensive, more goal scoring opportunities are going to become available for me, right? Because the ball is always in your half of the court. Right. And so that's the concept of that particular position that I'm trying to push forward. So then when you really understand that and it becomes autonomous, you don't need to know a 1,000,000 step sequence to pass, right? Because you can just kind of go for 1 or 2 sequences and it doesn't work, but you just constantly operating and pushing forward in that zone, more goal scoring opportunities are going to become available, right? Another concept that's much more well-known and easily understood is with leg locks and heel hooks is controlling the knee line, right? If I want to heel hook you, I need your knee line. If you're trying to escape the position, you need to clear your knee line. So that's just like a very black and white concept, right? Obviously, on top of that concept, you then build your kind of complicated techniques. But, it's just by shortcutting that, and instead of going into this really complicated sequence of, oh man, I'm going for a heel hook, I'm losing your knee line, so now I do this to get it back and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, I can take that route, but if I'm trying to catch up to someone and compete against someone who has 10 more years of learning these, 1,000,000 step sequences, I'm never going to catch up to him, whereas I can just go, well, don't lose the knee line, right?
Yeah.
And then, so it's kind of like position over submission, right? That takes precedent, that concept in that position. And, some positions have multiple concepts that you need to understand. So focusing on concepts, I believe, is the best way. I don't want to say it's like a hack, but it's just,
Shortcut. It is a shortcut.
Well, I don't even think shortcut's the right word. It's just more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's the best way to describe it and to summarize it, if you will. It's it's
and,
efficient.
And some of them, like let's look at Gordon Ryan's passing sequences that some of the part, like he has multiple. Gordon Ryan's obviously, we're talking about the best of the best in no-gi grappling. But if you look at some of his videos with Bernardo when he's doing his passing sequences and stuff, yes, you could sit down with Gordon and get him to lay out that 1,000,000-step sequence because you're talking about the best in the world. But a lot of when you watch a video of his, it's not even necessarily this step-by-step sequence. Like you can pretty much just summarize it to, okay, so he just pummels and makes sure he has inside control, right? And then from there, he like connects that to whatever pass he wants to do. So it's like the concept of pummeling to have inside control, and then that leads him to a body lock, a knee cut, or whatever the pass is he wants to do.
And you can apply this to so many different areas. Like I remember I went away and, did some stuff with Jeremy, like early days of jiu-jitsu, and I came back and then you're like, and just he taught me one concept. It was like inside control with a knee shield or something like that from open guard. And that just leveled up at the time because I knew from, going from nothing to something, or not nothing, but you know what I mean? Like being given a concept, just focus on this and go with it where you will. Now there's 1,000,001 ways to maintain that knee shield. There's 1,000,001 ways to, progress from there and what have you, but just understanding that concept, maintain inside control with your knee and your arms inside in that open guard. And that's how you play that position.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's something that I'd like to do a whole episode on at some stage because we can talk about different concepts for different positions.
I think we should, yeah.
But I mean, we even, the episode that came out, what was it? Hang on. Kieren,
Spreadsheet time.
Yep. Calm down. Episode 35, which was released on 16th of November, escaping side control and mount. It's not that hard, right? And in that episode, I talked a little bit about the concepts of, your hip mobility and your shoulder mobility. And
use your hips to free your shoulders.
Use your shoulders to free your hips, right? And it's, sometimes it's super complicated, but I believe I probably mentioned this in that episode, but it's kind of like when you look at wrestlers, why wrestlers are so hard to hold down is because they come from this sport that they lose the match if their shoulders are pinned, So it's kind of like if I said to you, Kieren, all right, Kieren, I'm going to put you in a role. Like, I don't care what happens. I don't care how many times you get tapped. You just win if you don't end up with your shoulders on the mat inside control or something ridiculous like that, right? I bet you wouldn't end up inside control, and so understanding concepts is so crucial to really getting good at jiu-jitsu nowadays because it's moved a little bit away from this really methodical, step by step, right? Because there's some people that are just so inherent in understanding their concepts that you can never get their knee line because they've got this, no matter what, they always clear their knee line or whatever the position is.
And more concepts you understand, the more, even if you don't know the specific technique your opponent is going for, if you understand the concepts that surround the position that you're in, you'll be able to identify, okay, so he's trying to attack this because he's looking for that control.
That's exactly right.
So you understand things without knowing what they are.
So I'll give you another example of a concept that is maybe a little less well known. When you berimbolo someone, right, similar to heel hooks, you need their knee line, right? Because controlling their knee line is what gives you the control of their hip to berimbolo them, right? So let's say you're getting berimboloed by someone. Man, berimbolo players have incredibly complicated berimbolo sequences that I don't know them, right? Like I'm not a berimbolo player. And they they invert so much and it gets really complicated and they do it incredibly well. But exactly like you said, I don't need to know the sequence they're doing. But if I just know, man, if I can clear my knee line, he can't berimbolo me. It's not like he can't. He could then reconnect it and recapture my knee line. Of course, it's not like, but I clear my knee line. Yeah, harder. Right? Or they can turn it into a leg drag and then from the leg drag, these guys re-invert and retake your knee line and lots of stuff. But that in that particular moment, I don't know what he's doing short of that he's trying to berimbolo me. freaking clear my knee line, now he either can't bearing bowler you or he has to do a whole nother set of movements to re-bearing bowler you, right? And so fucking get amongst the concepts, bro.
Yeah.
I recently saw an article that essentially, I didn't read the article because it was from our very reputable, what is it? BJJ Eastern Europe.
They're awesome, man. Don't knock them.
Shut up, Kieren, just because they publish you.
Yeah.
And
check them out.
Yeah, and it was essentially titled as a similar thing, like, learn concepts or focus on concepts.
Yeah.
And that's definitely advice that everyone can take, right? You don't have to, you can maybe ignore my, I wish I was more selfish advice, but if you're someone
I don't know, you're pretty fucking selfish.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I didn't even bring you a coffee. It was just water in a cup.
You spat in it,
Yeah.
stirred it around. It's like, fuck, take that. Yeah.
But-
one point that I have as well, and I mean, I cannot even, we can't even spend too much time on it. We can't even overstate how important concepts are. But one thing I want to tie to that is anatomy. And I've had a few light bulb moments about this, and particularly when people like yourself, or when Toyu does it really well, Jeremy Skinner, and talks about different jiu-jitsu submissions and positions and what have you, and referencing anatomy. And what sort of is bringing this to the forefront of my mind is yesterday we were doing straight footlocks and different straight footlocks, different variants. The way you were describing, like how the braking mechanics works, the position, the fucking ankle's connected to the knee, connected to the hip. You control this. You control the whole system. That sort of concept, right? And like how different grips on different parts of your body will control other parts because they're connected. An example is if you want to control someone's forearm, right? You want to control their arm effectively. You would grab. In a lot of positions, you'd grab over the knuckles of their hand, because then when they're trying to break free of that grip, the loose position or what's giving them flex and ability to move and what they have to fight against is their wrist, right?
Yeah.
So they have slack effectively in their ability to pull away from your grip. However, if you grab their wrist, they have the strength of now their tricep, their bicep, and their elbow tendon to pull that away. So
and the weak
easier.
point becomes your grip.
Exactly. So by understanding those concepts, but also tying those concepts to understanding not I said anatomy, but you don't need to understand anatomy. Just understand basic points of leverage. Apply technique, leverage, some of these things.
You definitely need to understand like the biomechanics of how the body works.
That's a better
way
to put it.
You don't need to geek out too hard on it. Like you don't need to
grip the metatarsals.
Yeah, exactly right. Or it's like when people, in the leg lock game, they always talk about. I even forget the words, but instead of just saying when someone's toes are pointed or flexed, they say dorsiflexion and plantar flexion.
Yeah.
Fuck, bro, just say pointed or flexed like a regular person.
That's how Jeremy describes it, and he'll say like grab the metatarsals and place the foot into plantar flexion, and this will create tension in this joint. He's like, but then again, he's selling instructionals on it, and he's going to the next level. You don't need to use those words to describe the same position. Just he does it very articulately.
There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying it doesn't need to be. You don't need
just
to
sounds
learn.
like a wanker.
Yeah, you don't need to learn that level of anatomy.
But
you don't
understanding the biomechanics, like the wrist example is brilliant. And once I understood that concept of biomechanics, then it made things easier for me.
That's a lesser known position, and I mean it's a very obvious mechanic when you explain it, but a more well-known one is like when you're trying to pass half guard or something and you've got head control. If I've got their head facing one way, their hips facing the other, it twists the spine a little bit. I mean, it doesn't crank the spine, but it unaligns the spine, right? And it makes the mechanics of their whole body and their legs and their hips and their back and everything weaker. It's the same way that like you can't have your hips and head facing opposite directions when you do a deadlift, right? Because like you're not mechanically strong. You need everything linear to be pressing or lifting or squatting, right? And so it's just understanding that that's how the body works, right?
Yeah.
Fucking science, bitches.
Yeah,
right? You got to
legit,
understand a little bit, and then even just the concept of understanding the mechanics of the body. And I don't understand it as well as someone like Lockie, who's a fully fledged physiotherapist, has a PhD in what did he do his PhD in? I think in like knee surgeries or recoveries, rehab, something like that. Anyway, someone like that, or someone
Lachlan Giles,
or someone like Mikey Musameshi, who super geeks out, they would know way more than me. But you still need to understand the concept of the mechanics of the body, and then because just understanding that concept, you might not know what you're trying to do, but you can to some extent figure out where the weakest link is. And in any position, you could think of it as like a closed chain, a closed circuit, right? If you took a photo of whatever position and had it as a closed circuit, there's going to be one particular link in that circuit will be the weakest, right?
Yeah, and it's your ability to identify and then exploit it.
Yeah, and make sure that the weakest link is on them.
Not on you.
And if it is on you, make sure that weak link is protected.
Yeah, that's a brilliant way to put it. And when I think this week I've had this real revelation, it's this sport, and we talk about it a lot, it's like playing chess with human bodies, right? But
it's like playing a game of chess, but your opponent can move your pieces too.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. Yeah, it's playing a game of human chess where the opponent has free range to manipulate your pieces. That's a really good analogy. But when you look at it, right, this sport is one human versus another human is utilizing our bodies, and by understanding concepts, you're able to manipulate positions. But the big missing link for me meant in my mental model, BJJ mental models.
Shout out.
They don't need a shout out as a podcast. For those that don't know.
If you're listening to us and you want a quality jiu-jitsu podcast.
It's BJJ mental models. I think they're number one. Anyway, by that was a missing link for my mental model is, hang on a minute, like I need to start understanding the human body and just biomechanics, right? Not into details. I don't need to know the names of all the bones and things like that. But understanding, wrists don't bend that way, but a little bit more sophisticated than that. It has, even in the short time that I've really come to that realization, now that I understand a bit more biomechanics and I understand more concepts, when you present a new scenario, a new position, I can start to see, even if it's like brand spanking new, I can start to see relationships to other concepts that I know.
For sure, right? Yeah.
And then that makes your jiu-jitsu so much easier.
And it can't be overstated, because you, like anything in life, when you become experienced at something, it's very easy to take for granted your knowledge, or to forget, or it's very easy to forget that the beginners don't, things that are very obvious to you aren't obvious to other people. So
it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, is it?
It's got a name, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, because you see beginners not understand the mechanics of the human body, and that goes not just as far as them not being able to apply things correctly, but it goes as far as hurting their training partner.
Or themselves,
right? Because, the reason I almost never have a day one beginner roll is not because my students will hurt them. I know my students won't hurt them, but it's this person who's not used to grappling, and then they try do a movement that they're very physically capable of doing, but not with 80 kilos on top of them. And then they don't even necessarily seriously injure themselves, but I don't want them walking out being like, I tweaked my back.
And they never come back. Yeah.
Right? Because then they don't understand that, but that was like a lot of torque going through your lower back when you did that movement with that person on top of you or something, right? 100%. Or they, you'd be surprised the crazy stuff that beginners do where they could seriously injure someone. I saw someone the other day, like with a chin strap. For those who don't know, it's like when you wrap a guillotine, but instead of like going under the neck, you literally cup your hand on their chin, right? So it looks like one of those
all the time.
Yeah, it looks like military helmets that have literally a chin strap cupping the chin. Very great control. But they had a chin strap, and they were like cranking on the dudes like it was something out of a movie, and they were going to go whatcha, and like break his neck.
Oh, like the old fucking
and I was like,
karate,
bro,
like
I don't think you understand how much control and torque you're putting through that person's neck when you crank on a chin strap. It's not designed for that because that's very dangerous, right? There's almost no competitive jiu-jitsu scene that allows you to like attack the spine. There are very few competitions that let you attack the spinal column, right? And so I was like, man, because they just don't understand.
I got that from Terrence. Terrence is a blue belt at our gym, and he used to chin strap me all the time. The amount of control he would get out of that,
super annoying.
And I just like took it and I use it fucking all the time. I love it. Give
it
a go.
Yeah, give it a go, chin straps. So, I mean, we spoke more about just my advice to me, but I think in terms of if you're a competitor, investing in understanding competitive mindset, whether that's seeking a sports psychologist or talking more in depth with your coach, things like visualization, focusing on concepts is super important. And that goes as far as understanding biomechanics of the body. And for my personal advice, definitely I needed to put myself first a little bit more in the gym, right? I think it's kind of my only regret is not achieving the competitive, goals that I had. I still did well. I'm still super happy. It's not like I'm sitting here all depressed, but like
you crying?
Why are you wearing glasses indoors? But anyway, I gave it my best. That would be my advice to me.
Yeah, awesome. I think a lot of
if I can train more. No, I train a lot. I don't think I could even tell myself to train more. I trained so much back then. God.
I mean, for me personally, listening to this, I can definitely take a lot away from that, particularly the competitive mindset. And we've spoken about that before, but very surface level. So yeah, I'll definitely be utilizing that. And I'm not going to be nice anymore. I'm going to start like I'm not even going to say hello to you. Start spitting on my hand when I shake people's hands.
Well, I mean, when we have competition training, like man, like people are like in the middle of the roll. They'll be like, "Hey, ads, are you?" I'm like, "You don't talk to me now, bro. It's like competition training."
I don't like it when people talk. I'm just gonna say on air, I don't like when people talk to me during a roll, unless it's like, if it's like Joey, for example, now black belt. Haha, I can say it. So at the point of recording, he hasn't been promoted yet, but by release he will be. So Joey, when I'm rolling with him, he'll have like a hectic knee on belly and look me in the eyes and be like, "Just breathe, bro. Just breathe." Yeah. Talking shit. Yeah. That's totally acceptable.
Yeah, but you and Joey also have a very good relationship. Exactly. Like it's not like he's just some random blue belt who's smashing you with knee on belly and being like, "Just breathe, bro. Just breathe."
Yeah, he's not being a dick. It's funny, right? Have to be there. But when people are just randomly talking to you, it's like, I don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's also not the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, dude, okay, when the timer ends, like ask a question. Or sometimes, if we're competition training and people are supposed to be getting a drink and changing partners and they come over to ask me a question, it's like, bro, you don't have fucking time. You got 1 minute.
That's why we need bring back penalty burpees.
Penalty burpees, bro. They're coming back.
Hell yeah. I don't even know why I went on that tangent. But if you enjoyed this episode number 45, advice to my younger white belt self from Adam's perspective. Appreciate you listening, particularly if you got to this point in the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please feel free to follow us on your streaming platform of choice. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening.
We're on them all.
We're on them all. So go find us, follow, leave a review, all that good gear. And if you want to take your support to that extra level, we are on Patreon. We do post some good stuff there, live Q&As, etc. Fix Your Game segment. We didn't steal that from Flow Grappling at all.
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them. But thanks for listening. Until next time, see ya.
Peace.